Well, how's it going, everybody? We're back again. I wanted to do this a little bit sooner, but this year's Game of the Year video is going to be sponsored by upper respiratory infection during your Christmas vacation. So kind of delayed us into January, but I was so excited to do this. Video games last year for me, and I know we're at the point now where we're only seeing each other once a year, although that actually may change. I have some ideas for some other videos that I'd like to do within the near future. But video games this past year in 2025 just kind of didn't really grab me. I'd say that there was probably only one release that really got me to the point where it was something that I wanted to play every day until I finished it. So it was definitely kind of a down year for me. And it was interesting because as I got towards the end of the year and I started kind of compiling the list and the awards and all that stuff that we're going to get into today, I really felt like that I kind of just didn't play a lot of games. But then I went back and looked at my list of every game that I played that was a 2025 release versus every game I played in 2024 that was a 2024 release. And I actually played more games last year than in 2024. But I felt a bigger disconnect with playing games than ever before. And that's something that I'd like to kind of correct because I want to get back into playing games. Now, obviously, the height of doing this channel where I was doing a podcast every week and playing games constantly and putting gameplay footage up and streaming and the whole thing, like more active than ever playing games. And it's just, that's not going to be the case. I don't have the time in my life to really do that anymore, but I do want to do more with this channel this year and talk about games. And it's for two reasons. One, I actually genuinely kind of miss doing this. And the second is I think it'll kind of keep me more engaged with playing video games rather than just watching somebody else play a game or listening to a podcast where they're talking about games. I really want to experience more for myself and finish more games and try different genres and the whole thing. So my year last year was definitely a little bit odd. Made a kind of couple big decisions with games. The first of which was I ended up deciding to get rid of my PlayStation 5. I just hadn't turned it on in a really long time. I play pretty much everything on either PC or Xbox. And the only thing I played on my PlayStation 5 last year was I went through about half of Spider-Man 2 again. And I replayed The Last of Us Part 2 when the new season came out. But other than that, it was quite literally just kind of collecting dust. So I decided to get rid of it. And what I decided to do with the money I got from selling it was I actually bought a Switch 2. I didn't buy the Switch 2 at launch. It was a couple weeks after. And I honestly didn't anticipate buying it because at the time I was like, well, the only thing that I really want to play is Mario Kart. At the time Donkey Kong wasn't out yet. It was a month later, 6 weeks later or whatever that Donkey Kong had come out. I was like, you know what? I think a Switch 2 would be a perfect Christmas 2026 purchase. By then, we're a year and a half into the system's lifespan. There's going to be at least a handful of games that I want to get, and that would probably be a really good opportunity to get one at that point. Stock would be easier to get. Although the Switch 2, I will say, actually, aside from the first few weeks, it was somewhat easy to get one. It wasn't anywhere near the issues that we had with the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox One. And I was sitting at work because I decided another big life change this year. I decided to go back to the office life. I was self-employed for the past year for all of 2024, and that just wasn't working out. I wanted a steadier paycheck, health insurance, things like that. So I decided to take a position in the education field, which is something I've always really wanted to do. So I'm back to being, driving to work every day. I've been working from home from 2020, March of 2020 all the way until February of 2025. And it was just I was just done with that. I wanted to get back out into the world and interact with people. So I was sitting at work one day and I was just kind of browsing Blue Sky as one does. And the great Wario64 said, hey, Target has Switch 2's in stock today, online and potentially in store. And I don't know what it was about that day in particular, but I was decided, why don't I take a look? And the Target by where I work, there's a Target maybe a 5-minute drive away from the school I work at. They had them in stock, and I had the money from selling the PlayStation 5 and decided, let's go get one. So I went and got one, and I played, Mario Kart World and messed around with it. And then, I really wanted to not buy Donkey Kong when it came out because Donkey Kong at this point, I think, was just about to come out or just did come out. I can't remember. Might have been the same week that Donkey Kong came out that I ended up getting the Switch 2. I honestly can't remember. And I decided, I'm going to finish a couple other games before I decide to get Donkey Kong Bonanza. But then that weekend, my girlfriend had come over and she handed me a copy of Donkey Kong. She had purchased it for me. So then, of course, the guilt kicked in and I felt obligated to play it. So but the Switch 2, I genuinely enjoy the system. I think it's a neat little thing. I'll be honest, I haven't played that much of it. I put obviously quite a bit of time into Donkey Kong, put some time into Mario Kart. Mario Kart I really want to get back to. I'm not liking it as much as Mario Kart 8, but I also need to give it a little bit more time. And then obviously, I still have the same Nintendo account, so all my Switch 1 games that were digital purchases came over. There were some sales throughout the year, so I ended up grabbing the Paper Mario remaster that came out. My favorite game of all time is Mario RPG, and they had done that Switch 1 remake. And just about a week ago from the time I'm recording this, I think it was on sale for half off online somewhere. I think maybe it was Walmart, and I ended up picking that up. So I have a grand total of 4 Switch 2 games, aside from like the digital stuff that I had carry over from the Switch 1. But I think it's a neat system. It's something I'm never going to play in handheld. It's just going to stay docked, which I'm fine with. But I enjoy having it. It was exciting to get a new system. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out. I didn't play Metroid. I was never really much of a Metroid fan. That was kind of the other big release of the year outside of Donkey Kong and Mario Kart. So I didn't really get into that, but I'm excited to see what 2026 has to offer. Mario Tennis is about to come out in a couple of months. Maybe that's something that will get me to kind of hop on, but I'm excited for the future of Nintendo. And it's nice to have a Nintendo system again. I got rid of my Switch in 2021. So there were a lot of Switch 1 games that I missed that now that I have the Switch 2 and can play all of them, kind of top of that list, there is Kirby and the Forgotten Land. They had done the Switch 2 update for it, and I had never played it when it came out, so I'm really looking forward to getting into that. And so that's definitely gonna be a game that I play this year. The other thing is, I still have my Steam Deck, although I ended up buying a dock for it. It is now docked, and the Steam Deck is kind of just an emulation station now. It's got everything that I could possibly want for retro stuff and arcade. It's got the full MAME library on there and all that stuff, and it is nice to have the handheld if I should so choose to use it that way. There was a couple weeks ago, my girlfriend wanted to watch TV. I felt like playing a game. I didn't want to watch what she wanted to watch, so I just got up and grabbed out of the dock and sat back down and played some games on it. So it's nice to have that option. But that's really kind of become a docked thing. In my entertainment center, it's got the Switch 2 and the Steam Deck right next to each other with the Xbox sitting underneath. And then kind of the other major video game thing, which has been actually really nice, and I wish I kind of had this up and running the past couple of years, but it was just so inconvenient, is I really got to the point where I wanted to get the PC into the living room, but I still need the physical PC to be here in my office so I could sit down and do work. So I was able to set up a Moonlight and Sunshine server and get it to stream wirelessly out into the TV. With the new monitor I picked up this year, everything's at 120 hertz. It's running at 4K. The whole thing looks great on the TV, because now not only do I have the OLED out in the living room, now I have an OLED monitor in here. So if I want to be in here, I'm getting the same level of quality of screen gaming that I am in the living room, which is really nice. Though I kind of purchased this monitor more for productivity stuff because I got back into doing photography this past year and I needed something really nice that was color accurate, that was going to look good to edit photos. But it's just kind of a nice byproduct of that it's also a really great gaming monitor. So getting the PC, being able to play that in the living room is really nice. I just keep an Xbox One controller out there that's connected. And actually, it's funny. Instead of connecting it to the PC itself, which was creating input lag, I actually just connected the controller straight to the TV, and that got rid of all the input lag. So I keep like a little combination mouse and keyboard out there. So if I do need to navigate things, I can do that. But with Moonlight, you can actually turn the right stick of your Xbox controller into a mouse cursor. So you really don't even need it unless you actually do need to type. So it's actually a really nice thing to have. And that, I think, going into this year is going to be really nice. The plan was for this year to build a new PC. This one is getting a little bit long in the tooth when it comes to what I want to do with it for gaming. And I was going to find myself probably by the end of this year financially in a position where I could really get something that's really kind of tricked out. But as we've seen, RAM prices skyrocket, even storage prices are insane, as I wanted to just buy another solid state drive for this PC to be able to, install more games on it and have like a nice little library of stuff I can just grab that's already installed. And the prices of solid state drives are it's just ridiculous. So it's been a lot of hard drive management over the past few months to get everything working right. But it's been really, really nice. A lot of the games that came out this year, I played the PC version instead of the Xbox version, and being able to play those from the PC into the living room without any problems was really, really nice. So I was very much happy to have that. But that's kind of like how I spent the year in game. I really kind of focused more this past year on getting outside of the house and just doing things. I wanted to go to a lot of great concerts. We took a trip to Philadelphia in the fall. We were supposed to have another trip in December, but we got hit with a massive snowstorm. We got really buried. I think we got about 4 feet over the course of a couple of days. And then there were some towns a little bit north of us, closer to the lake, that got 5 to 7 feet, if not more. We were completely snowed in a few times. People had to get, plow services and everything to be able to just get out and get to work. But a lot of things just got shut down. Restaurants got shut down for the day. Some were even shut down for a couple of days. Like our school, we closed down. It was difficult going, so we did have to cancel a trip, but we've got some fun stuff planned for this year, so it'll be kind of nice to get back out there. But yeah, last year just wanted to kind of get out of the house. That was the big thing, was just kind of get out of the house. Every weekend I wanted to get out and kind of go and do something different, and because of that, games kind of took a hit. I got back into building Lego sets. I've got the massive brand new Star Trek The Next Generation ship, the Enterprise, sitting on my desk in my study, that's like partially put together. Just got the new Shopping Street modular building in the mail last night. So getting back into Lego, just getting back into old hobbies. Like I said, getting back into photography and stuff. But this year I do want to place a little bit more of an emphasis on games and getting back into games. And I think that's just going to kind of come down to a combination of time management to make sure I have the time to do it, but also maybe getting a little bit more involved with this channel. What that's going to be, I don't quite know. Like I said, I don't certainly have the time to get back into doing a weekly podcast or anything like that, but I think we will have at least some videos throughout the year. I've got ideas for a couple already that I plan on filming in the next couple of weeks. We'll have that. And I think I'm going to do the Xbox Developer Direct that's coming up. At the time of this recording, it's coming up in like 2 weeks, I think. And I think we'll do that as well. But we are going to go through a handful of things, as we always do in these videos. We're going to go through music next. Then we're going to actually talk about movies and TV, because I actually got into movies and TVs again, or TV shows again. And, it's usually something that I just very much gloss over or don't even bring up in these videos, but went to the theater quite a bit this year, got to see a lot of great movies. After that, we're going to get into our game awards, and then we're going to get into the game of the year. It's going to be all time stamped down below, so if you feel like skipping a section, feel free to do so. With that being said, we're going to be back in just a moment and kick things off talking about a little music. All right, let's talk a little bit about some music. I thought it was a really strong year for music last year, but it was kind of in a different way. The past few years, I really thought that pop was kind of dominating everything. If you looked at kind of my favorite stuff for the past couple of years, there was a lot of pop music, but I thought pop kind of took a backseat last year. It was actually really weird. Like usually there's like a song of the summer, and I don't think there really was one last year, because so many songs that were still charting really high being played, whether it was in TikTok videos, Instagram, Spotify charts, Billboard charts, all that stuff were 2023 releases. But that being said, I thought last year for heavier music was a phenomenal year. Some really, really great stuff. So more so than any time, I think, since I've really done these lists, my top 10 favorite albums, my favorite songs, the honorable mentions even, although a little bit more diversity in the honorable mentions, really kind of dominated by heavier stuff. So why don't we talk about some songs first? I'm going to kind of just gloss over these because it's not really something we need to spend a ton of time on, but just some of my favorite songs. These are not going to be any particular order. I'm going to go with Two-Headed Trout by the Calisthal Boys. Super catchy hook in it. Really, really enjoyed it. Soft Spine by Spirit Box. I think that's one of their best songs that they've honestly ever done. Behind the Clock by AFI. AFI has gone full goth now, and I think that's actually a really, really strong song. Really, really enjoyable. I think it would have been an absolute banger back in the 80s because it is very heavily 80s like goth influence. But it still sounds fresh today. Tales of War by Orbit Culture. I honestly think that's their best song that they've ever done. I thought that song absolutely ripped. Just really, really strong track. That was what Spotify told me was my most listened to song of last year. Amethyst by Deafheaven. The whole Deafheaven album was fantastic from start to finish. One of the Greats by Florence and the Machine. Jesus Christ, when she wants to cut somebody to pieces, she can really do it. I'm going to pronounce this probably wrong. Vidmahe by Charlotte DeWitt. We're going to talk a little bit about Charlotte DeWitt in a second, but man, if you really want some music that sounds like the pause menu music to a PS1 futuristic racing game, that's the album that you want to listen to. God Gets You Back by Mogwai. It's the opening track on their newest album. Really, really great guitar riff. Absolutely love it. Mr. Predictable by Beach Bunny. Super, super catchy song, a fun song to listen to. Really, really enjoyed it. And Where the Hell Is My Husband by Ray, kind of a later in the year, or at least I didn't hear it until later in the year. One of my favorite tracks of the year. I am super excited for the the upcoming Ray album, especially if it sounds like that. Bruno Mars at the time of this recording just put his new song out yesterday, and he announced his tour, and I saw that Ray is going to be opening for him on some of the dates. That's awesome for her because you know that tour is going to sell out immediately. He's playing stadium, so a really huge audience for her, which is going to be awesome. But my favorite song of this year was a band that I had actually heard of before, but never really listened to. And I kind of wish that the rest of the album sounded like this because this album didn't end up being even on my honorable mentions, let alone my top 10. And that's Headstones by Creeper. I found the song through Instagram, actually. They were running ads for their new album, and they were playing like a 20-second clip of this song. And I was just like, oh my God, this is like fantastic. So I looked it up, fell in love with the song, listened to it like nonstop for like the first couple of weeks. I'm still listening to it now, like a couple months after I finally found it. I just wish the rest of the album kind of sounded a little bit more like this. But as I listened to some of their previous discography, that's just not really their thing. This is kind of the outlier as opposed to the norm. But I really, really did enjoy the song. So we're going to get into the honorable mentions for albums of the year. So the way I kind of do my albums of the year is I write down, just like I do with every movie I watch, TV show I watch, video game I play, I write down every album that I listen to, and then I whittle it down to a list of kind of, okay, here are my short list for album of the year. And the short list this year, which wasn't a very short list, was 60 albums. I had 60 albums. I thought it was actually a little bit more than that, but I'm looking at it right now in front of me. 60 albums that I kind of curated down to a top 10. In terms of albums, I seriously considered for the top 10, it looks like it was about 25 albums, so a little bit less than half of that. So there's some really great albums that didn't even make the honorable mentions list, but going to the honorable mentions, Psycho Frame, I thought their album was really, really great. It's just really just over the top, relentless kind of deathcore, death metal, however you want to frame it, no pun intended, but really, really strong stuff. I thought the Skrillex album was really solid. I genuinely hadn't really listened to any of his stuff since kind of like the height of his fame, with what was it, Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites or something like that, whatever it was, the Somebody Call 911 song was on there. Tyler the Creator's album, I'll be honest, I never really got super into Tyler the Creator. He just never really kind of crossed my listening preferences. I think I probably heard some songs here and there, but I actually really, really enjoyed this album and went back to listen to it a couple of times. And this really just barely missed out on the top 10. Marar came out with another album. I don't know if they're classifying as an album or an EP because it's a little bit on the short side, but they just have such a unique sound. I think last year they were it was either last year or the year before they were on my top 10. Really, really strong stuff. I thought the new Lady Gaga album was pretty good. Definitely the strongest pop release of the year. I think a lot of people were kind of expecting it to be a Sabrina Carpenter's album. And to be honest, I kind of expected it to be Sabrina Carpenter's album as well, but I really kind of thought that album was a letdown. Just didn't really enjoy it overall. It's not that it's bad. It's just, I guess, just not what I was looking for this year. AFI, like I said, they've gone full goth. I actually really enjoyed the album. They're a band that's, taken a lot of risks and taken a lot of changes over the years. If you're a fan of that band, I highly recommend you go listen to the 4-hour long interview that spans the entire career of the band that Hardlore did with Davey Havok. It's a really fascinating listen. And I really enjoyed it. I've been along with them for the ride through all the changes that they've made. And just going to be a fan forever, I imagine. And the last honorable mention I want to talk about Charlotte DeWitt. Such a singular, specific focus for an electronic album. I mean, like I said, I kind of made the joke when talking about the song that it sounds like the pause music to like a Wipeout game or like a Psygnosis game from the PS1. And that's really what it is. It is a very hyper specific style of techno. All the songs are a little bit samey, but I think with electronic music, I'm okay with sameness throughout an album because it really is something that you should listen to from like beginning to end and just kind of like zone out to and vibe out to it and the whole thing. And sometimes in electronic music and dance music, whatever you're listening to, whether it's EDM, EBM, whatever it is, sometimes that repetition is kind of what you want. You just want to settle into a groove. And I think she does a really good job with the album. I think she picks her spots really well with some of the vocal melodies she layers in. It's a lot of like chanting kind of stuff, things like that. Again, just constant repetition with that stuff. And I think it ultimately ends up working really well. But we're going to get into the top 10 albums of 2025. These are going to be in order from 10 to 1. We're going to start off at number 10 with Beach Bunny's Tunnel Vision. This is an artist I had never heard of before, but as I was getting a little bit later into the year, I want to say this was maybe about October, I just started kind of Googling different music websites to see if they had done like, here are our favorite albums of the year this year, just to see if I had missed anything. And I saw a couple of different websites put this Beach Bunny album on there. And I listened to it. It's great. It's a very kind of like 90s throwback rock album. Reminds me a little bit of like a Veruca Salt, though not as much edge as like a Veruca Salt, but it's definitely something you could have listened to at the time. I feel like Beach Bunny would be like the band that they hire in the movie to play at the prom or something, like kind of like how Letters to Cleo was it 10 Things I Hate About You, and I think the Donnas when they were still the Electrocutes or Never Been Kissed or something like that. It's one of those movies. I feel like Beach Bunny would have been like, oh, that band that's in that movie, I remember them. But really catchy stuff. You'll be humming it for days. Another album that I went back to and listened to a few times and just really enjoyed it. Number 9 is going to be Xenotaph by Fallujah. Great, like, prog metal band, long stretches of instrumentation, but they do have a vocalist that's, present throughout. I really enjoyed their output over the years. Every time they put an album out, it's always going to be one of my favorite releases of the year. Just a really strong band. They actually just came here where I live not that long ago, maybe like a month and a half ago, and played live. I wasn't able to go. It was on a Monday night. And it was at a venue that just has like notoriously bad sound. So I didn't want to have to go out on a weeknight and also listen to just a bad mix the entire night. But I would like to catch them live at some point. So I was a little bit disappointed that I missed them. The Black Keys, No Rain, No Flowers, coming in at number 8. God, such a really good album from them. Every song is catchy and memorable, just top to bottom. I think one of their best releases in quite some time. Really enjoyed everything there is on this album. Just a really solid offering. I'm a big Black Keys fan. I love that style of music, that kind of guitar forward, kind of bluesy, a little bit of Southern influence, like the Delta influence, like all that stuff. Just really enjoy what they have to do. And I think they put out just some really strong tracks. Next up at number 7, an album I genuinely thought probably would have been higher, but I just, for whatever reason, just didn't connect to it as much as I thought I would. And that's Tsunami Sea by Spiritbox, the new Spiritbox offering. Like I said before, we were talking about the songs. I think Soft Spine is one of the best tracks that they've ever done. I just don't think the rest of the album really kind of held up to that track, that level of quality. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if I just genuinely didn't click with these songs, or the band has kind of spread themselves thin because they've been putting out a lot of material since their last album, which was their debut album. They put out several EPs, just a lot of tracks in between that kind of bounced around genres a little bit, different influences here and there. So when this album came out, I genuinely didn't know what we were going to get. And honestly, they kind of abandoned everything that they had done on those EPs and kind of just went back to sounding like they did on their debut album, which is perfectly fine. This isn't bad by any stretch. It's just a little bit of a surprise for me that I just didn't enjoy it more, but still a really, really strong offering. They're at the top of my list of bands that I would like to see live. Can't wait for whatever they do next. And I wish them all the success because they are blowing up and they are doing really well for themselves. Next up, where are we at? We're at number 6 is Death Above Life by Orbit Culture. I generally thought this was also going to be higher because I thought they had some of the strongest tracks that had come out from like the singles for this album. They had released, I think, about 4 songs before this album actually came out. Chief amongst them, like I said, my most listened to song according to Spotify was The Tales of War. One of my favorite tracks I have heard in a really long time. One of my favorite metal tracks I've heard in at least the past 5 years. Definitely, I think the best song that Orbit Culture has ever put out, which is, I was surprised to say that because While We Serve is a certified banger. But yeah, I just thought that this would hook me a little bit more. I think the album just, it's got some low spots and it's got some high spots. The highs are really high. The lows aren't really low. It's just that the highs are so high that even though everything else is still good, it just kind of creates a odd separation of the two, I guess. And I think there's just other albums that came out that just I liked a little bit better. All right, number 5, kind of another surprise because typically when this band puts an album out, it is my favorite album of the year. But I think this one was a little just not as memorable, and that's Skeleton by Ghost. Ghost is probably my favorite band that's like a current band that's out there. I mean, I've just absolutely loved everything they've put out. I think they're a phenomenal live performance. Just really enjoy everything they have done, and I was so excited to see what direction are we going in. And when Satanize came out, the first single, I was a little like, all right, it is what it is. The song's fine. It's not that bad. But then Lacrima came out and I was like, oh my God, this is one of the best songs they've ever done. I absolutely love this. I don't know how I didn't put that on my favorite songs of 2025. That is I did. Jeez. I think I just didn't mention it. I think I skipped right over it. But yeah, Lacrima by Ghost, I think is one of their strongest songs. Also, if you're a fan of the song Poison by Alice Cooper, because they are very similar to each other, which is funny because that's my favorite Alice Cooper song. But Skeleton, I think, just has some low points that just aren't great. Was it Melissa Amori, the Love Rockets Across Your Eyes, like song about just blowing a load on somebody's face? Just like, okay, all right, cool, whatever. But I think there are some really strong tracks on that album. And I think as time goes by, I think maybe time will be a little bit kinder to it. I think this is a situation where it's maybe a little bit like their second album, Infestissimum, where people at the time didn't really enjoy it. And then as time went on, they kind of warmed up to it. Although I think, the dedicated Ghost fan base, the TikTok Ghost fan base will just pretty much think everything they do is perfect. But I want to see what the future of Ghost is. I think that whatever comes next, the next album is going to be a big challenge for Tobias, the kind of, chief songwriter and of the band is, what direction are you taking this band? Are you going to keep going down this road of this like very like arena rock style stuff? Or are we going to kind of turn the clock back a little bit and get to kind of like the roots of the band? Because on this tour, the Skeleton tour, they are playing some older stuff, some stuff they haven't played in a while. And I think the response was definitely a little weird for the band because a lot of the fans that are going to see Ghost are people that found them through Mariana Cross blowing up on TikTok and have not really listened to some of the older stuff, kind of stuff where we were really talking about Satan all the time, like that kind of thing. So I'm really kind of curious what direction he ends up going in. Next up, number 4 for the year for me is The Sound a Body Makes When It's Still by Hot Mulligan, a band that I have heard of because you hear that name and it just kind of stands out, but I had never really listened to them before. I actually genuinely didn't know what kind of music they even played. But I kept seeing stuff online about how good this album was. And I was like, let me give it a listen. And I absolutely loved it. It brought me back a little bit to kind of some of the stuff I was listening to in high school. I think that this is an album, whether this is factful or not, I don't know. But in my mind, this is an album that seems like it's kind of influenced by Infinity on High era Fall Out Boy. Fall Out Boy is my favorite band. Infinity on High, my favorite album by them. And this to me sounds like a band that kind of took that sound and said, okay, well, let's see what we can do with this and make it our own. And I just genuinely really, really enjoyed it. I think that there wasn't like a singular song on this album that like really stood out, like, oh, this is the track to listen to. But I think when you take it as like an entire piece of music, it's really, really solid, really, really enjoyable to listen to. And I went back and listened to some of their older albums and really enjoyed those as well. Though I will say I didn't like any of them as much as I like this one. But I am now fully in. If they come around here, I'd like to go see them live. Super looking forward to whatever they do next musically. So yeah, really, really enjoyed it. Number 3, I Don't Want to See You in Heaven by the Callous Doll Boys. I really like Celebrity Therapist, their previous album. And I kind of figured they were going to trend upward. They were getting more and more notoriety. They were ending up on a lot of top 10 lists for different music websites I go to. I knew more and more people just in my own life that were talking about them, but I definitely didn't expect this. This album is absolutely incredible from top to bottom. In a different year, this would have been number 1. Just really, really enjoyed this. Super catchy hooks, fun songwriting, memorable guitar riffs, just everything you could possibly want. I've seen footage of them live, and it looks like they would just be a blast to go and see live. I got a buddy of mine who's seen them, I think, a couple of times now. And he could certainly, confirm that they are, they're a lot of fun to go see live. So I definitely like to check them out. But yeah, this album just, I mean, it came out and I listened to it and I ended up listening to it again a couple more times. And then I kind of took a break from it because there's other things were coming out that I was listening to. And then probably about a month or two ago, I went back and just ended up listening to it like another 5-6 times over the course of a couple of days. And it's an album that's going to last. It's going to be an album I go back to this year, next year, in the future. It's just really, really strong songwriting that I think is just going to stand the test of their career. Number 2, which was my number 1 for a while, is Lonely People of Power by Deafheaven. I really enjoy Deafheaven. I kind of got into them when a lot of people did when Sunbather came out. I got to go see them live on the Sunbather tour, and it was just an incredible experience. I really, really enjoyed what they did, even kind of the left turn they did with Infinite Granite, which was an album really without the screamed vocals, clean singing throughout. This album is definitely a return to form to a little bit of the Sunbather days, I guess. I think it's more aggressive than Sunbather is, but it is definitely a black metal album. I mean, it really is kind of a black metal album. There's no kind of ifs, ands, or buts about it. Really super strong lyricism in it. Really, really great songwriting. I think one of the hallmarks of Deafheaven is that kind of memorable guitar work, because they're able to use a lot of effects and play these kind of like really beautiful melodies on top of these like really harsh dissonant guitar riffs that are being backed up by blast beats and George the vocalist screaming at the top of his lungs and the whole thing. But the guitars do kind of cut through, and that's like the beauty of not only their songwriting but also they write and record their albums and mix it and all that, making sure that those elements are prevalent in there, because a lot of really harsh music, and make no mistake about it, this is a harsh album. It does kind of blend together. Like, obviously there's pieces you can pick out and you can, remember things and really enjoy things, but there are times where it just kind of all just sounds like everything got tossed into a blender and spit back out. But I think they do a really good job throughout their career, making sure that those memorable moments, those guitar riffs, all that kind of cut through. But number 1 this year, a band that I absolutely love. Every time they put an album out, I just fall further in love with them. It's the Badfire by Mogwai. Just, my God, they're such a good band that just doesn't get the attention that they deserve. I know they've been doing a lot of like soundtracks to, I think they did like a Netflix movie maybe a couple of years ago. I'd love to see them do more stuff like that, because you see like somebody like One of Tricks Point Never doing some movie scores. I think he actually just did Marty Supreme, and I think he did a couple other things. I would love to see Mogwai get some more work doing that stuff, because I think they really shine during that stuff. But then also when they're just sitting down to do a studio record, like the Badfire, I think they really, really are at their best. Just a fantastic album that I went back to time and time again. A great album to put on when you're just driving around. Honestly, a great album to put on when you're just kind of doing work. If you're doing paperwork, you're doing like editing where I don't need to listen to audio. Like when I was editing photos, I listened to this album a lot, and it's just really, really solid stuff. So yeah, that's all my favorite music for this year. We'll be back in just a moment to take a brief look at my favorite movies and TV shows of the year. Let's talk about movies. So for the first half of this year, between January and I guess probably June, July, I was going to the theater quite a bit. My girlfriend really likes going to the movies. I enjoy going to the movies as well, though less so these days because kids at the movies and even adults at the movies just have zero social decorum anymore. People, at least in the theater by us, are just constantly screaming on their phone, having full-blown conversations on their phone. It's just a nightmare to go to the movies. I enjoy going to see the IMAX stuff because we do have a really nice IMAX theater here. And my girlfriend had never seen any IMAX stuff before, so I took her along to a couple. So we really enjoyed, but then I guess after the summer, we just ended up doing other stuff and we just kind of didn't get back to the movies. So a lot of the stuff that came out after like June, I ended up watching at home when it came out, for home releases. I didn't do a top 10 for this. I'm just going to go through some of the stuff that I really enjoyed. I guess like a couple of things that weren't among my favorites, but I did enjoy. I actually really like Karate Kid Legends. We went to go see that at the movie theater I went to as a child, which is still around and still looks like a movie theater from the 80s or 90s. Despite they've like remodeled the seats, so it has like the reclining seats and stuff, but like the hallways and stuff, like the building itself is still like super vintage looking. So it was a really nice trip to do that. It's like a 45-minute drive from my house to get back up there, but it was worth it, and I actually really enjoyed it. It was nice to see Karate Kid stuff after the end of Cobra Kai. I liked Friendship, the Tim Robinson movie. I thought that was pretty good. Fountain of Youth, what I was hoping was going to be kind of like a throwback to like Romancing the Stone, The Mummy, all that stuff. It just wasn't as good as it probably could have been. Final Destination Bloodlines, we absolutely loved. Super funny, really well done. I ended up watching it a couple more times after it came home. We went to go see it opening weekend in the theater. And really enjoyed it. I guess the big one that I didn't like that everybody else really seemed to like was Weapons. We went to go see it in the theater. I don't think it was opening weekend, maybe like the weekend after. And we left the theater and we were walking back towards the car and I turned to her and I was like, well, what'd you think? And she goes, I don't know. She's like, what'd you think? And I was like, I don't know. I kind of didn't like it. And she was like, yeah, I don't know if I liked it either. And I don't know if she's warmed up on it since then. I actually went back just to double check. I watched it again, I think twice afterwards. And I still just don't think it's as good as like everybody was saying it was. I mean, it's fine. I guess I just didn't really get into it as much as everybody else. But for the movies I did really, really love, these are not in any particular order. I'm just going to kind of read them in the list that I have them on here, which I think is just alphabetical list. Begonia. So I took a week and a half off for Christmas. I ended up sick, like I said in the beginning of this video, with a really severe upper respiratory infection. So my vacation, I had to cancel all the plans I had. So I ended up just staying home and playing a ton of video games and watching movies. And Begonia was kind of the first one that I watched on vacation. I fucking love this movie. I thought this movie was fantastic. I'm looking forward to seeing it again. Jesse Plemons has been phenomenal. I have been a fan of his for such a long time. I'm so glad that his career is just kind of blown up and he's getting all these really amazing roles. I think he's a super talented actor that has a ton of range, that can do a ton of different things, and just really enjoyed his work in this. Emma Stone, again, I've been a huge Emma Stone fan for a very long time. Everything from Easy A to, the more adult things that she's been doing, not adult things, but like the more like weird things she's been doing over the past few years, that relationship with Yorgos Lanthimos, who did this movie, has really kind of given her a lot of like range to go all over the place with things that she's done. So I really, really enjoyed it. Caught Stealing, the new Darren Aronofsky film. Aronofsky is my favorite director. There's certainly movies that he's done that I don't like as much as others, and there's movies that he's done that I absolutely love. I think the only one I've actually never seen was he did that Noah's Ark movie. I actually don't think I've ever seen that, but I love like The Fountain and Pi, and obviously The Whale was a big one from a couple years ago that I wasn't super, super high on that, but I've always really enjoyed. I mean, I loved Mother, which a lot of people could not give less of a shit about. By the time I finished watching Mother in the theater, I was the only person left in the theater. Everybody else had left before that movie was over. Now, granted, there was only about 6 of us in that theater seeing it at like 1 p.m. on a Thursday, but everybody besides me left. But I really actually enjoyed that movie. And Caught Stealing, I thought was really, really enjoyable. I like Austin Butler. I started Elvis but didn't finish it, to be honest. But I really liked his character in Caught Stealing. I think he did a really good job. Is it Matt Smith? The kind of the punk guy in this movie I thought was pretty good. The woman, her name escapes me right now, who played the detective, I really enjoyed. Bad Bunny's in this movie. Love Bad Bunny. So that was really fun. Fantastic Four First Steps. We went to go see this in IMAX opening weekend. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. I think I've watched it like 3 or 4 times since then, since it's kind of come home. Really enjoyed this. I've been really up and down on Marvel stuff. When the Marvel boom was really happening, I didn't go see any of those movies at the theater. I just didn't really like them. I like the Spider-Man movies. I'll go see the Spider-Man movies in theaters, but I just don't really like them. But a couple of years ago, I sat down and I watched every single Marvel movie up and through the last Avengers, what was it, Doomsday or whatever it was called. So I haven't seen any of the stuff post that. Like I haven't seen like the Eternals. I did watch like half of Thunderbolts this year. I do need to go and finish it, but I am genuinely excited for Avengers Doomsday. I think I'll probably go opening weekend to see that, but Fantastic Four, I really enjoyed, really loved the cast. Thought the cast was absolutely fantastic. One battle after another. Obviously this is the movie that's getting a ton of attention, winning a lot of awards, nominated for everything under the sun. Very understandable why. I know that like Leonardo DiCaprio is obviously, doing a really, getting a lot of praise for this, and he is very good in this movie. Everybody is very good, but man, Sean Penn is like on another level in this movie. He really makes you believe that he is this just horrible, detestable person. I think his performance is really phenomenal in it, and a really solid movie. I think maybe it's a little bit long at times. I think it could have been trimmed maybe down a little bit, but there's a lot to get through in that movie, and I did genuinely really enjoy it. Roofman, this is the Channing Tatum movie that came out not too long ago, based on a true story of a man that was living inside of a Toys R Us, although he actually ended up living inside of a Circuit City as well, but the movie doesn't cover that part. A really fun movie. He is super enjoyable. I love Channing Tatum. Whether he's doing a little bit more serious stuff, whether he's doing more humorous stuff like this and like 21 Jump Street and all that stuff. Really enjoyed it. Really liked it. Sovereign. This is a movie again, based on a true story. This is a Nick. No, it is Nick Offerman. God, I was about to say Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec. Nick Offerman movie, who I love Nick Offerman, especially when he does more serious roles. This again based on a true story about a father and son. The father was a part of the sovereign citizen movement, and this led to a very unfortunate incident with some police officers. I remember hearing about this real incident when it happened. And when I saw that this movie was coming out, I was like, oh, okay, no, I remember what this is about. It's not an amazing movie, but it's an enjoyable movie, and I think it's one that's worth watching if you're a fan of Nick Offerman's work. After that, this is actually probably my favorite movie of the year, and it was Superman, which I was really surprised. So when I grew up, I loved comic books, but I read a lot of comic books that weren't necessarily superhero comic books, but I certainly did read my fair share of superhero comics. Read a lot of Batman, a lot of Spider-Man, a lot of Lobo, a lot of X-Men. That was kind of like my wheelhouse. But Superman I always just kind of found was a little bit boring. The only thing I ever really enjoyed for Superman was the New Adventures of Lois Clark, the Dean Cain Superman. Dean Cain is my Superman, although he's now apparently a giant piece of shit. So that sucks. But I really loved that show. I thought it was a lot of fun. I ended up getting into watching it because at the time the reruns were on right before wrestling started on Monday nights. So I would catch like the last half an hour of a bunch of episodes of Lois and Clark. But I ended up buying like the DVD box set at one point and watched through the whole thing. But I was really surprised how much I liked the Superman movie. I have not liked any of the DC movies aside from like the Nolan Batman, and I did like the Robert Pattinson Batman. But I couldn't get into like the Justice League stuff and the Aquaman stuff and the Batman versus Superman and all that. I just didn't like it. All the newer Superman movies, post like 2000, I did not enjoy. So I was really surprised how much I like this. I think this might be my favorite superhero movie of all time, aside from like The Dark Knight. I love this, and I'm very excited for Supergirl now. I'm very excited to see where they go next with that like Lex Luthor focused movie. I am like all in on what they want to do with Superman now. I'm really looking forward to it. And then the last movie I'm going to talk about, again, a true story, a biopic, The Smashing Machine. This is the movie about Mark Kerr starring The Rock. I think The Rock does a phenomenal job in it. The makeup work on his face is really good. He does look a lot like 2000s era, Pride era Mark Kerr. So my relationship with Mark Kerr kind of goes back a really long time with watching his fights. When I was a child, our local mom and pop rental store, because I lived in a town too small to get a Blockbuster, they had a wall in the store that was like their sports section. And it was like a lot of the early UFC VHS tapes, like the first, I don't know, 7 WrestleManias, the first like 7 Royal Rumbles or Survivor Series, like all that stuff. So I would rent. Typically on a Friday night, we go and rent, and I could rent 3 movies. So I would typically get like a horror movie and then like a wrestling VHS tape and like a UFC VHS tape. And I just watched the same ones over and over again. I saw UFC 3 100 times, just like I've seen WrestleMania 3 100 times, or, you know, Royal Rumble 1994 100 times, you know, like whatever it was. So I remember watching a lot of Mark Kerr stuff because he was in the early UFC, but he also participated a lot in Japanese MMA. And I was a huge fan of Pride, finding ways to watch Pride online. You know, so I enjoyed watching his career. He was a great fighter. I think the movie is absolutely phenomenal. It's probably could have been shortened up a little bit. It's a sad story, but it's not one of those stories that's like so unbelievable that's like, oh my God, they need to make a movie out of this person's life. So I think if you go in the expectations, like you're just going to see like a good movie and not like, oh, well, this guy must have had some crazy shit happen to him to make a biopic. It's not like that. He obviously had a very tragic life at points, but, you know, it's not as like this overwhelmingly sad movie or like overwhelmingly depressing movie, you know, because he did ultimately come out on the other side, you know, okay. And he's, you know, living kind of like a normal life these days. They show him at the end of the movie, which is actually kind of nice, the actual real person. But yeah, I thought it was a good year for movies. I'm still getting caught up on some stuff. I got a lot of stuff sitting on my Plex server that I need to watch. But for TV real quick, I mean, The Pitt, unbelievable. I'm rewatching the first season of The Pitt right now. At the time of recording this, the first episode of season 2 came out 2 nights ago. I am hooked. I am invested. That cliffhanger at the end, my God, I cannot wait until next Thursday. I've been watching Task, which came out last year. I haven't finished that. I got a couple episodes left. I thought the last season of The Bear was obviously better than the season before, but, you know, pretty solid stuff. Dexter Resurrection was unbelievable. I couldn't believe how good that show was because Dexter itself ended so fucking poorly. You know, the first 4, maybe even 5 seasons, if you want to go that far, of Dexter were really solid stuff. And then just, God, that show went off a cliff after a while. But Resurrection was really, really great. A lot of fun cast in there. I love Peter Dinklage. He was also in Roofman, so I enjoyed seeing him, you know, get some stuff this year. Toxic Avenger is on my list. I just haven't gotten a chance to watch it. But yeah, some fun stuff this year. And that's going to do it for movies. And then we're going to get into games. It's that time. All right, let's get into the games. It's kind of the main event, right? So what we're going to do today, we're going to talk about some of the games that I played this year that kind of didn't live up to expectations. We're going to get into kind of our awards. I want to talk about the past 10 years of my game of the year real quick, because I thought it'd be kind of fun to do that. So some of those were things that we've discussed on this channel, and some of those were before that. Then we'll get into our honorable mentions, and then we'll get into the actual top 10 list. So in terms of disappointing games, because I used to have a category for like worst game, and I kind of thought that was just a sort of a shitty thing to do. I didn't really like doing that. So I just want to talk about things that just didn't live up to my expectations. And I think the biggest one this year, the big shining neon light, was Skate. Skate 3 is still a game that I put in quite a bit of time. I think I checked last year and I put in about another 100 hours into Skate 3 last year. And I think I was at about 150 hours the year before. It's a great game to play when you're listening to music, when you're listening to a podcast, you have another screen up and you're watching a movie or a TV show that you don't quite need to pay 100% attention to. So I find myself just playing a ton of it. Same with sports games, because I'll play sports games on mute and then just listen to podcasts, watch a show, whatever it may be. I really was hoping for more from Skate, but it's not just the microtransaction stuff. It's not just the free to play stuff. I think it just looks bad. I think it plays bad. I could get through the free to play stuff and the microtransaction stuff, because even though I don't personally do a lot of free to play stuff or, you know, really heavily microtransaction games, I have in the past. I've certainly spent money on games. I've spent money on Apex Legends when that came out. I've certainly bought battle passes before. So it's not like this like thing that I'm like totally opposed to and would never do. There is a world where Skate becomes like a huge thing for me, and I am spending money on it. So it's not that. It's just I didn't like the way it played. I know people say like, oh, it feels the same as like Skate 3. It really doesn't. I can boot Skate 3 up on my Xbox and play it for 5 minutes and then go into the new Skate and be like, these are not the same thing. they're just not. It doesn't feel the same to me. And maybe for people that like played a lot of Skate when it came out, like Skate 3 or Skate 2, to them it feels that same way. But in terms of somebody that's still putting in dozens and dozens and 100 hours into Skate 3 every year, it just isn't the same. And I just also don't like the way it looks. I don't like the way the city looks. I don't like the way the characters look, which isn't like a game breaker or a deal breaker, but it's just a combination of things. It was kind of like the perfect storm of disinterest, I guess you could say. Next up was Recreation. So I love the Burnout games. One of my favorite racing games of all time is Burnout 3. I just really loved it. Burnout Paradise, I just didn't really get into as much. I really enjoyed the game, but just wasn't as big of a thing for me as some of the previous Burnout games were. And Wreckfest I enjoyed, but when they talked about Recreation coming out, I was like, man, this might really be it, because I think that it's a good time to have an open world game like this. It's made by those people. It's going to probably play pretty similar to it. And it actually does. It does feel very similar to Burnout Paradise. And I think it maybe feels a little bit too similar to Burnout Paradise to a fault. I think it actually works against it. Also, the game just feels unfinished. It's lifeless. It's kind of devoid of personality. And it just was just a real bummer when I fired it up. I played it for a couple of hours, and then I was like, you know what? In my mad dash to get, more games played to talk about this year, I couldn't bring myself to start it again. It just didn't interest me. So yeah, it is kind of a shame. And then the last one, which I'm going to put this on the disappointing list with an asterisk, simply because I didn't play enough of it. And since the last time I played it, they have patched and changed a lot of it. I didn't have time to play it over the past few weeks to see if it kind of would have maybe made it onto my list, or at least off of this talking point. And that's Civ 7. I've been playing the Civilization games religiously since Civ 3. That was my first one. So every time a Civ game comes out, I am buying it day one. I bought the $100 version of Civ 7 the day it came out, and it just didn't click with me. I didn't like the changing of the civilizations thing. I just didn't like the kind of gimmicks they put in there. I understand it and I respect it, because you've been doing this series for so long. You kind of need to shake things up a little bit. So I completely get it. From that perspective, I 100% understand why they did it. It's just not for me. And it sounds like they're patching that out. Either they have patched out recently or they are patching it out soon. So I think that they kind of understood that, like, okay, well, we took a swing, we missed, and we're going to listen to the fans. So I'm actually really looking forward to playing more of it. I actually have it on my to-do list for tonight to fire it up. If I don't get to it tonight, I'll get to it this week. And I do want to play more of it, because I was listening to one of the video game podcasts I listened to. They were talking about it recently and said, it has changed since the initial release. So I really do want to go in there and see what exactly has changed. So that was something that it's on this list as a disappointment, but a disappointment with an asterisk. The next thing I want to get into is we're going to start talking about the awards. And I always like giving these out. I don't have as many this year as I typically do. I think we're going to go through 5 of them. But it was fun kind of figuring all these out, because I think there were really strong contenders for all of these awards this year. We're going to kick things off with Best Style. Now, I want to talk about what Best Style is to me. Best Style is a combination of all things style. So it's not just Best Graphics. It's not just Best Art Direction. It's everything. It's art direction, world building, the graphical performance and fidelity. It is music. It is all of that. Menu design. Everything gets factored into this. So the nominees I have are South of Midnight, which is, my God, such an incredible looking game. It falls into that same category as a Harold Halibut, as a Cuphead, where it has a super distinct art style that you just really haven't seen before. And I think that there are going to be a lot of games that kind of rip this game off in the years to come, much like how this year was definitely the rise of games heavily inspired by Balatro. I think graphically and design wise, you were going to see games influenced by South of Midnight. Donkey Kong Bonanza I put on this list. I think that it's got a pretty different looking style. It's still very Donkey Kong, but the environments are pretty varied. I like the design of the characters, the design of the enemies. Donkey Kong itself, or himself, looks really solid. It plays really well, good music. Just again, kind of I would say it's one of those things where like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts sort of thing, where there's not like one thing where it's like, okay, it's very clearly the best looking game, but the music's not as good. It's one of those things where it's like everything is really good. And when you put it together, it kind of elevates itself. Next up is Sword of the Sea. What a phenomenal looking game. I mean, this is made by people that did Journey. Journey was such an amazing looking game. Sword of the Sea, no different. I really, really like the way this game looks. I think they did just such a tremendous job with the world building through storytelling, which we're going to get into. It's a non-verbal game, and so it's heavily relying on what you're seeing visually on the screen, and it is by leaps and bounds such an amazing contender for any type of style award, best looking game award, any of that stuff. Hades 2, some of the best 2D artwork I have seen in a while. I really like the character design. I think fidelity wise, it's super smooth looking. There's a lot of cool effects on the screen. It's very bright, colorful, even though a lot of the environments you're seeing are very like dark, dim environments. Like we're in the underworld or whatever it may be, or we're in this like kind of weird, like industrial looking zone, like that kind of thing. But there's still like a lot of pops of color from the weapon effects and things like that. So I think that it really does a really strong, amazing effort into the way it looks. And then also musically, there's just like little hints of music. Like there's that in the opening section there, you'll hear that like bass riff that plays a little bit of like just kind of like in the background, and it just kind of lends to the tone that they're trying to set through everything, and just really enjoyed it from top to bottom. Just really great look. And again, talking about 2D art, we're going to get into it with the rest of our nominees, which I'm going to kind of all lump together in a way. And that's Marvel Cosmic Invasion, Dispatch, and Terminator 2: No Fate. Dispatch obviously looking like a cartoon because it was originally pitched as a cartoon that they ended up adding gameplay elements to it. So it's got that look of a polished animated show. Marvel Cosmic Invasion, obviously taking the comic book influence, putting it into a game, a really strong throwback to the, kind of the X-Men beat 'em up game in the arcades in the 90s. I really, really enjoyed the look of that. And then Terminator 2: No Fate, really trying to nail that 90s arcade ish style. I think it's one of those things where it's kind of like halfway between like what a Super Nintendo could do and an arcade cabinet at the time. It's not, it's a little bit more fidelity than just a straight 16-bit game, but not as quite as clean and dynamic as some of the arcade games that were coming out at the time. It's got a really, really nice sense of style. I think all of these are more like visually pushed, though I think Dispatch actually did have a really, really good soundtrack, oddly enough. But these were games that kind of got onto this nomination list simply because of how strong they are visually, whereas some of the other games on this list were more of like a total package kind of thing. But the winner of this award for best style, we're going to go all the way back to the beginning of the list. South of Midnight, such a striking looking game, fantastic music, fantastic environment work. The world that they built in it is such an amazing thing, going off of like the Southern United States mythology, some of the creatures that you see, some of the bosses you see, the giant alligator, the giant kind of undead man that was in a lot of the marketing materials and kind of initial trailers that we saw for the game. Hazel itself, or herself, the main character, looks phenomenal. That low frame rate kind of style thing that you're seeing that I think a lot of games are going to get influenced by, especially because Death Stranding 2 had a low frame rate character, and I think you're going to see a lot more of that. But South of Midnight is going to take the Perfect Reload Best Style Award for 2025. Next up, we're going to go over to Best Performance. This is obviously for best voice acting, performance capture, motion capture, however they ended up doing the, capture for this game. We're going to start off with Adrian Ray, who was Hazel in South of Midnight. Really, really strong performance. Hazel's a really fun character. She's like kind of got that like a little bit of that sassy side to her, which is really nice to see. Aaron Paul playing Robert Robertson from Dispatch. I'm a big Breaking Bad fan, though I don't think it's not as high as on my list as it probably is on other people's lists, but I actually always really enjoyed Aaron Paul's performance. I mean, obviously people really kind of funnel into Bryan Cranston's performance, but I think Aaron Paul honestly was just equally as strong. And so to see him, because I haven't seen a lot of his work, he's certainly popped up on TV shows here and there and things like that, but I haven't seen a ton of his work. So to see him do something that has a little bit more comedy, and honestly, he kind of plays the straight man in a lot of this, whereas, the dynamic in Breaking Bad he was a lot of the comic relief, right? So it's kind of cool to see him flipped on that. Laura Bailey, also from Dispatch, Invisigal, really, really good performance. I think a lot of people really enjoyed the Invisigal character. Laura Bailey does such amazing work. She's built such an amazing career doing some really phenomenal, memorable characters. And I think Invisigal kind of is going to be added to that. Gabe Cusillo, he played Nate, the main character in Baby Steps. Baby Steps is not a game that we're going to really talk a lot about today. I enjoyed playing it. I played it along with my girlfriend was watching me play it, and she really enjoyed it. She thought it was really funny. She thought it was really entertaining to watch. I think there's some really funny moments in that game, especially because everybody is voiced just between two people. Bennett Foddy voices every other character, and Gabe Cusillo voices the main character, Nate, and he's got some pretty funny lines. And then the last one, I can never pronounce this right, but it's Judy Ellis-Lee for Melanoe, the main character that you play as in Hades 2. I think she does a really, really strong job in there, especially because Hades 2, there's voice acting in there, but that is a game that theoretically, if you wanted to, I don't think you would lose as much as some of these other games if you were to, say, play it on mute, because it is at times a grindy kind of game because it's that roguelike style to it. So I could certainly see people maybe like zoning out, putting on their own music or whatever it may be. Although I think you are doing a little bit of a disservice to the game because it does have really strong music, strong voice acting, the whole thing. But I think she really does a good job. But the winner this year for the 2025 Perfect Reload Best Performance is Aaron Paul. I think he just knocked it out of the park as Robbie in Dispatch. I think he just did such an amazing job there. And I was very happy to hear that after the game came out, he said he is certainly game to do a sequel, because I think that game definitely deserves a sequel. I want more of those characters. All right, next up is best storytelling. Best storytelling for me is not just the page, the words on the script, the pages that they are reading. It's also that environmental storytelling. It's everything that you do that kind of gives you that world building, that lore, all of that stuff. So the nominees we have are South of Midnight. Again, I talked a lot about this during the best style because this is a game that does a lot of visual storytelling through the environment, not just the actors, saying their lines of dialogue. Next up, The Outer Worlds 2. Not the greatest story in the world, but I also thought it was pretty enjoyable. It was tough. It was kind of between this and Avowed, and I think I just enjoyed the world and the humor of Outer Worlds 2 and just kind of that nonsense, like corporate overlord type stuff. I think I just kind of enjoyed it a little bit more. So I ended up going with Outer Worlds 2. Next up, Dispatch, which is kind of a given because this was originally pitched as a television show, and you can certainly see that it probably would have been a successful television show, although I think it maybe would have struggled just because I think some of that stuff is maybe on the way out, like The Boys is ending. I know Invincible is kind of a similar-ish thing, at least to me. I've never seen Invincible, but on paper, to me, it looks like a similar thing. So I think maybe getting this out of being a cartoon and being a video game really kind of helped them quite a bit. And I think that they just put together a really strong, like, if you really look at this like a season of a TV show, I think they really did an amazing effort. And then the last one, again, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but it's Sword of the Sea. Amazing visual storytelling because it's a non-verbal game. There's no voice cast or anything. It's all being told through visual clues, context clues in the world around you and all that stuff. It's a game that you really need to experience. I think it's one thing to watch somebody play that game or to like watch, a YouTube gameplay video or something like that. But I think it's a game that you really got to get your hands on and experience that story for yourself. So that being said, the winner for best storytelling this year is going to go to Dispatch. I really enjoyed it. I don't, like I said before, not a huge superhero fan, but I really, really liked what they did. They had such a great voice acting cast. It was a funny game, and humor in video games, while it's gotten better over the past 10 years, still a difficult thing to do. But I really, really enjoyed what they did, and just couldn't put the game down as I was playing it because I just wanted to see the next episode. By the time I actually started playing the game, it was right before the final 2 episodes came out, so I actually didn't have to wait that long. I had done the first 6 episodes, and I think I only had to wait maybe 3 or 4 days, and then I was able to close it out. So I did it all over the course of a week. But I can certainly understand, like, if I was playing it, like waiting for those other episodes to come out, I probably would have been like chopping at the bit, like, come on, like, let's get this thing out. Like, it was kind of a throwback to, like, you know, waiting for the Walking Dead episodes, the original Telltale game, although those got delayed a lot. There was a lot more wait than just like a week or two, like there was for Dispatch. But yes, congratulations to Dispatch. Great story. All right, next on the list, the most anticipated game of 2026 that isn't Grand Theft Auto 6, because it is Grand Theft Auto 6. I gave it that award last year for my most anticipated game of 2025, but it obviously famously got delayed. So I don't want to pick it again because it also could very well get delayed again. But the category, or the nominees that I have are 007 First Light. I'm not a huge James Bond fan, but I'm a huge IO fan. I love the Hitman games, so I want to see what they do with this game. I will be honest, that big gameplay video release that they did not blow me away, but I am very interested in playing the game. It's probably going to be the first, I guess probably first AAA release, or no, it won't be because it got pushed back to May, so it actually won't be, but it will be one of the first big games I buy of the year. Next on my list is Wolverine. I love Wolverine, but I'm going to tell you right now, Wolverine doesn't win this category for me, despite the fact that it actually probably is the pick, and that's something because I got rid of my PS5, which now looking at this was stupid. But I also don't know if this game is actually going to come out this year. I think it probably will. Insomniac, I don't think really has a big track record of delays. Maybe I'm totally wrong on that, but I feel like they don't really do that a lot. I know this game's going to be amazing, but I don't have a way to play it because they don't put their games out on PC for a little bit. So I think there is certainly the chance this year that I somehow have to find a way to acquire a PlayStation 5 short term so I can play this game. I think I might be able to pull that off. I'm not sure how quite yet, but I think that is a possibility that I might be able to do that. So maybe I do get to play it, but we'll see. Next up, this game actually does not have a confirmed 2026 release date, but I imagine it will come out this year. And that's Gears of War E-Day. Gears of War is one of my favorite franchises of all time. It's obviously gone down a little bit in excitement for me over the past releases. I think the original trilogy is absolutely amazing. But Gears like 4 and 5 didn't like set the world on fire for me. I did actually really like Gears Tactics though. But I'm really curious to see what they do with this. They get Marcus back and Dom back and all that stuff. So they're playing the hits, right? Like they understand kind of what they need to do to get people excited about Gears again. So I get it. And then the game that's going to win it for my most anticipated game was actually because the demo just came out and I really enjoyed it. And I think it's kind of a different thing. And that's Pragmata, the Capcom game that people were kind of hoping was a secret Mega Man game. But I really like the way it played. It's got this kind of like oddball combat system where you're like actively like hacking the robots that you're fighting. And you feel like that would like put a big disconnect in because like you're actively moving the character, trying to aim and shoot, but now you're also trying to do this little hacking mini game that pops up on the screen, but somehow they made it work. I really like the look of the game. It reminds me a little bit of like Vanquish, which is a game that I really enjoyed. And I don't know how well that hacking stuff is going to hold up over the course of the entire game. But in terms of what I played, it's got me very excited to play more. So because I have the ability to play it, because I have a PC that can play it, and I won't be able to play Wolverine at launch unless I kind of do some stealthy maneuvering there to acquire a PS5, at least for the short term, I'm going to give Pragmata a Perfect Reload award for the most anticipated game of 2026 that is not Grand Theft Auto 6. All right, our final category. This was a fun one to do simply because it was a game that had so many memorable characters. It's the best Dispatch character. Now, obviously, if you haven't played Dispatch, none of this is going to make any sense to you. I'm going to try not to like spoil anything, though I will probably spoil things when I actually talk about the top 10 list because spoiler alert, Dispatch is on the top 10 list. It would be weird if I gave it best storytelling and then its own category here and it wasn't on the list. But we're going to go with Robert Robertson. That was Aaron Paul's character, obviously winning previously for best performance. Phenomena Man, who I actually didn't pick. I went with the water guy instead, just because I really like Joel Haver. So when I play through this game again, I'm going to pick Phenomena Phenomenon to join my team instead. I really enjoyed his kind of like sad sack, just mopey as shit kind of attitude. I really enjoyed it. Invisigal, we talked about her again in best performance with Laura Bailey. She did a really good job. Flambe, who's just like a total douchebag, but I really enjoyed how like cocky and egotistical he is. He had some really funny lines in the game, so I really enjoyed him. And then the winner, because I'm not going to dwell on this category, especially because if you haven't played the game, this doesn't make any sense to you, but the winner is Beef. Of course it's Beef. Beef is Robert Robertson's very fat corgi dog. As a dog owner and a dog lover, I love when there's a fun dog in a game. And Beef is just absolutely phenomenal. Beef needs his own spinoff. Beef needs to start solving crimes. I really hope in the second game, Beef gets superpower somehow, and I just want a Beef game. He was absolutely fantastic. Really fell in love with that character. He was a lot of fun every time he was on the screen. Just great. Beef was very good boy this year. For best video game boy of the year, it goes to Beef. All right. Now that we got the awards out of the way, I want to talk about the previous game of the years. And we're going to go back 10 years in time. We're going to start at 2015 and go through last year's 2024. Now, obviously, some of these were since I started doing this category, which I started doing these videos in 2022. So this is our fourth year of doing it. So everything previous to that was just kind of my own list because like I said, I do keep a list of everything that I play. So let's talk about some previous game of the years. And I don't want to dwell on this a lot, but I think it would be a fun time to kind of take a trip down memory lane. In 2015, I put down Her Story. I really loved Her Story. I've gone back and played it again, but it's not a game that you can play a ton because you just kind of remember everything that happens and remember kind of how to get through the puzzle of searching through things in it. But yeah, just a really fun game. Sam Barlow is one of my favorite game developers because, spoiler alert, another one of his games is on this list later on. And I'm very excited to see what he's got coming down the pipeline. 2016 Uncharted 4, kind of, I guess, as of now, the end to one of my favorite franchises. I will be honest, I didn't quite enjoy Uncharted 1 that much. I think that's kind of just a broken mess of a game. But Uncharted 2 is one of the greatest games of all time, and Uncharted 3 is also very good. But Uncharted 4 was really just a phenomenal send-off to those characters. Really emotional towards the end, especially if you were like, invested in that series, which I was. Just a great playing game, a great looking game, a showcase for what the PS4 could do. Just really enjoyed it. 2017 was PUBG. 2017 was the first year that I tried like streaming, and that was before this channel. I used to stream on Twitch. I was playing it like almost every night. I was streaming, I think like 3 or 4 times a week, something like that. I would just kind of get home from work and then just, stream and play the game, and just had some really amazing moments playing that game. I don't go for a ton of multiplayer games where you need to have like teamwork with other people, typically because I just don't have other people that I know in real life that are playing those games, which is why I didn't really play Arc Raiders this year. I really loved the look of Arc Raiders, but that game, as I was playing it and like the betas that they did, just not fun to play solo, and I just don't want to play with random people. But there was just a perfect storm in my life in 2017 where I had a lot of coworkers that were playing PUBG, and so I also got on the PUBG train and just really loved it. 2018, this one was tough because 2 of my all-time favorite games came out in 2018, and that was Red Dead Redemption 2 and Marvel Spider-Man. I gave it to Marvel Spider-Man because it's the first time I had ever played a game where I wanted to do absolutely everything in it, like get every trophy, every collectible, every possible thing that you could do. I wanted to do it. Whereas Red Dead Redemption 2 was the first time I'd ever played like a big like narrative story, like long game, where once I finished it, I immediately started it over again. I had never done that before. And Red Dead 2, I think probably holds up a little bit better than Marvel Spider-Man, whereas I have played Marvel Spider-Man, the first one, multiple times since it's come out. I tend to play it probably once a year. Really one of my all-time favorite games. But there's something about the world of Red Dead Redemption 2 where I don't know if I would put Red Dead 2, like if I had to come up with like my top 10 favorite games of all time, I don't know if that would make the cut. Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't, but it's just such a fun world to be in and explore in that it's actually on my list right now of games that I want to play again this year that are, previously released games that aren't new releases that I want to play again this year. Just because I love experiencing that world. I love the characters. I think Roger Clark's performance of Arthur Morgan is probably the greatest video game performance of all time. And I just love experiencing that world. The next one, 2019, The Outer Worlds 1. I just really love that game. And it's not the most amazing game, but it's more so my game of the year that year and a really important game for me because it opened my eyes to a different style of game. I did not like the modern Fallouts, that first person RPG shooter kind of thing. I just didn't really like it. And this is around the time, if you remember, when Cyberpunk 2077 got announced as being a first-person game and not a third-person game. I think a lot of people thought that game was going to be third-person. And when that happened, it just sunk my heart because I was so excited for that game. I think the anticipation for Cyberpunk 2077 coming out could only be matched by my anticipation for like Vice City and Grand Theft Auto 5, because Grand Theft Auto is my all-time favorite gaming franchise. I was so excited for Cyberpunk, and I just sank when I heard that it was first person. But the year before, as we were waiting for Cyberpunk to come out, The Outer Worlds comes out, and it just blew me away, and it showed me, oh, I can enjoy these games. So when Cyberpunk came out, I was perfectly fine with it. And I've played other games in that style. I've actually gone back and I played Fallout 4. I played stuff like the Elder Scrolls stuff. I played Starfield and Outer Worlds 2 this past year and Avowed last year. And now I'm like, all in basically. I don't have a problem with that genre anymore. So The Outer Worlds, despite not being like the most like technically perfect game or anything like that, obviously it's a very enjoyable game. It was my game of the year for a reason. It really stands as a special part for me because it did open my eyes with everything. 2020, again, a tough one, just like 2018, because two really strong games came out in The Last of Us Part 2 and Cyberpunk 2077. I ended up giving it to The Last of Us Part 2 simply because Cyberpunk 2077 in 2026 is the game that I would rather play, despite last year going back and really enjoying playing Last of Us Part 2 again. But when you look at when the game came out, how broken it was, how messy it was, how kind of disappointing it was at the time, it's since been fixed and it's at a much better spot. The Last of Us Part 2 is a really complete, finished, polished, perfect package. I think the story goes on for a little bit too long. There are definitely points in that game where as you play through, like, okay, here's the end of the game, and then it goes on for another 8 hours. But it's still just a really well-made game, a really smart combat-wise game to play, and one that I really enjoy. 2021. This one's a little bit of a cheat. I gave it to Hitman 3. Now, Hitman 3 has a tremendous selection of maps, just like, Hitman 1, Hitman 2, really strong maps. Obviously, there's good ones and bad ones, ones that you would rather play on than others. But I think Hitman 3 gets it simply because of what Hitman 3 kind of became when it shifted away from just being called Hitman 3 and Hitman World of Assassination, where they tied the whole trilogy into one thing and have continued to support it. For years after they said they were going to stop. They said at one point, if you remember back then, they said, hey, we are going to get to a point over the next year or two where we are going to stop working on this game entirely, and we are going to shift all of our attention to this James Bond game that we're doing. That hasn't happened. We just had a major Hitman DLC with the Eminem DLC not that long ago. So they are still pumping out content for this. I love the way those games play. The unintentional hilarity that they have in them, just a lot of fun. Just really, really enjoy it. So yeah, that was my game of the year in 2021. And then as we get into 2022, 2023, and 2024, these are ones that I did on this channel. So I'm not going to dive as far into them because you can just go back and listen to my thoughts because those videos exist. 2022 is Immortality, the other Sam Barlow game on this list. Immortality is one of my all-time favorite games. I think it was excellently crafted from a storytelling perspective, from an acting perspective, kind of realizing the initial dream of what FMV games could be when the technology was really pitched heavily in the 90s. Like finally 20, 30 years later, capitalizing on that, I think is a really special thing. 2023, it's Marvel Spider-Man 2. If Marvel Spider-Man is one of my all-time favorite games, Marvel Spider-Man 2 is a bigger and better game in every way. But it was also had some really stiff competition that year. That was the year that Alan Wake 2 came out, and really, really strong game there. And then last year's game of the year for me, I thought last year We'll talk about 2024 at this point. So I guess technically 2 years ago, because we're recording this in 2026. But it was Dragon Age Veilguard, a game that obviously not perfect, had a lot of problems with storytelling and things like that. But the combat was just so good. It was so satisfying. Just throwing the shield was so much fun. I just really loved everything about that game. And obviously, my take on it aged like milk, because we're probably never going to get another Dragon Age game now, which really sucks. I would have loved a follow up to Veilguard, bringing those characters back and continuing that story of Rook, but it just probably isn't going to happen. But it is what it is. So I thought it was a nice little fun look back at years past. And now we'll be back in just a second with the top 10 games of the year for 2025. All right, it's time to get into the top 10 games of the year for 2025. We're going to start off with a handful of honorable mentions. I'll get the sports game out of the way real quick, and that's NBA 2K26. NBA 2K as a series really just appeals to me. Basketball is my favorite sport, and I just really love the way that their GM mode works, tons of customization, all that stuff. But the reason why I wanted to talk about this year's game in particular is from the actual gameplay perspective. I think it's the best the shooting has felt in quite a bit of time. There's some new additions they put into the game with some like signature post moves and stuff like that. And I think when you combine a really solid single player experience with how well the GM mode does, mixed with how well the game actually plays now, for a basketball fan, it's a phenomenal offering. Obviously, it's still played with microtransactions if you want to do like the online single player stuff. That's not for me. I don't engage with that stuff. Same with like the mystery pack card stuff, the My Team or whatever they call it. I don't get it. I don't go in for that stuff, but just actually playing the game, I think, is the best gameplay they've had in quite some time. After that, we kind of had this rise of amazing like 2D beat 'em ups this year. Absolem, Cosmic Invasion, Terminator 2 No Fate's not really a beat 'em up, but kind of similar style. Ninja Gaiden had a new version come out. Shinobi Art of Vengeance, which I wish I would have played more of. It probably would have made this list if I had gotten a chance to play more of it. But there was like a real kind of just like litany of these amazing games, and so Marvel Cosmic Invasion makes my honorable mentions, as well as Absolem. Both really strong games. I think Absolem, obviously it's a little bit different because it has that beat 'em up styling, but it's also a roguelike, so it has that kind of repeatable thing in it, whereas Marvel Cosmic Invasion is a little bit more like a traditional arcade game, just kind of like going through the story. Both have great looks. I really enjoy the way both of them play. Obviously, beat 'em ups are going to be on the more simple side of things, but I think Marvel Cosmic Invasion having some of the team up stuff, having some of like the switching the characters kind of breaks up some of that monotony. And then Absolem having like kind of like the leveling up system, getting different abilities and things like that kind of breaks up their kind of just, you're just bashing on this button and moving to the right kind of deal. But both are really fun games, and I'm looking forward to playing more of them this coming year. And then the last game on my honorable mentions list, which I was actually really surprised about, was Ninja Gaiden 4. So Ninja Gaiden, the kind of the Xbox games, the ones that were on the original Xbox, that were like super hard, were not really my thing. Sorry, my dog is headbutting me now because he has woken up from his nap while I'm filming. I didn't really kind of go for those games. They were just too hard for me. I didn't really like the way they played. But Ninja Gaiden 4 being made by Platinum kind of piqued my interest a little bit, because even though I think Platinum has had some really down games, I think they've also had some really amazing games. Vanquish is a phenomenal playing game. I did like the Bayonetta series. And I think there was kind of like a point in time around that era where Platinum was like really on fire, but then they kind of ended up having some games that just didn't really perform that well, didn't play that well, and not looked upon favorably as we've gotten further away from them in time. But I really enjoyed what I played of Ninja Gaiden 4. I don't know if I'm going to finish it. I definitely want to play more of it. So we'll see where it goes with that. That's kind of like one of the reasons why I didn't crack the top 10, is just like, am I really going to put enough time into it? And the answer is probably no. But from what I played of it, I really did enjoy it. But let's move into the top 10 proper. And coming in at number 10 on Perfect Reload's 2025 Game of the Year list is Sword of the Sea. I loved Journey. There are other titles I didn't really play unless I'm just forgetting one off the top of my head. But Sword of the Sea, I just love the look of it. I love the feel of it. The gameplay is just really solid. It's really fun. Some, puzzles to kind of solve. I will say I got stuck a couple of times. I had to look up some help because I was just like banging my head against the wall for a little bit. But I just really enjoy the look of it, the feel of it, just everything about it is just really solid. And playing it so I actually ended up playing it in my office instead of going out to the TV. In the living room. I think it was just because I was in here and I was like, oh yeah, that's right, I gotta play that game real quick. And instead of just getting up and going to the other room, I was like, let me play it here. And it was one of the first things I played on this new monitor. And it's just so dynamic. It's just so beautiful, so fluid. It's just such a fun game to just sit back and relax. I mean, obviously, yes, there is some challenge to it with the puzzles, but none of them are like so insane that you're going to be like really, really stuck. I'm just bad at kind of solving puzzles, even if they are on the easier side. It's just not the way my brain really, really looks or works. But I really enjoyed my time with Sword of the Sea. Number 9 on our list was kind of a surprise for me. Terminator 2 No Fate. I just didn't anticipate liking it as much as I did. I remember I was playing it one night. And my girlfriend was on her phone kind of scrolling through Instagram as one does. And she looked up, she goes, wow, you're really still playing this game, huh? Because I don't, I obviously finish games, but I kind of play games in small chunks. I don't really sit and play the same game for a long period of time, 45 minutes to an hour. And then I move on to something else in my day. And, I'll go back the next day and the day after and the day after until, I make some more progress. And there's sometimes where I'll sit down and play a game for a longer stretch if I really have the time. But I was playing like Terminator 2 for like a couple hours and like getting deep into the game. And she's like, wow, like, do you like really like this? I was like, yeah, I know, something about it is just kind of clicking with me. Like, I love the source material. Like Terminator 2 is like one of my favorite movies. I love the franchise, love the characters and all that stuff. So maybe that helped, but I also just think it's a good looking game, a good playing game. And sometimes you kind of want a little bit of a throwback. So I was really enjoying my time with it, and hence why it made the list. All right, number 8, South of Midnight. Now, South of Midnight comes with a little bit of a disclaimer because there is a mode in this game that allows you to turn off the combat and play it as basically just a platformer. And that's how I ended up playing the majority of the game, because the combat to me just wasn't anything to write home about. Like, it's fine. I experienced it and I played it, but I was just like, do I really need to kind of do these battle arena type things? Because the way the combat works in that game is they kind of wall you off into like a circular area or like a closed area, and then you have your battle, and then once you're done, the thorns that go around you disappear, and then you can move on. And it just got to the point where I was like, well, it's just so samey that it just isn't really worth it. I just want to experience more of this game. And honestly, playing it as like a platformer, I think, was a little bit more enjoyable. I think it's a game where the combat doesn't really add anything to it. And the option that they give us to take away, I think, was actually a really interesting and kind of, risky choice to do, because then at some point, it's like, what if that's the way that people prefer the game? Now, obviously that's fine because you just want people to play your game, but you put time and effort into developing a combat system. I'm sure you'd like that to pay off. But for me, it just, wasn't really worth it. So I actually really enjoyed my time playing it as kind of a platformer. Amazing world building, amazing look. That's why it won, the best style award earlier in the video. It really is a great package. I think it just kind of got overlooked because it was an Xbox exclusive when it came out. But I really do urge you to play it because it is a lot of fun. All right, next up on the list at number 7 is Donkey Kong. Is it Donkey Kong Country Bonanza, or is it just Donkey Kong Bonanza? But anyways, Donkey Kong Country Bonanza is what I wrote down. I think that's what we're going to go with. I didn't expect to play the game yet, because like I said at the top of things, I also didn't expect to have a Switch 2 by now. And then because I got it as a gift, I really didn't expect to have it by then. I didn't even know if I was going to play it this year just because I had so many other games to get through. I think it's a little bit of a disappointing game for me, because I think it's a game that gets a little aimless at times, where you can spend so much time going after all these collectibles that are hidden in the ground and hidden in mountains. And, the destructibility of the game is unbelievable. It's incredible what you can do with it. The deformation you can put into the environment is really an amazing achievement. But I felt at times that I was just like spending too much time doing that, spending too much time hunting the bananas and trying to get health recovery or whatever it was that I was trying to do, where I kind of lost sight of the bigger picture and, the story at hand. And I didn't finish the game, but I played enough of it that I was confident that it wasn't going to go any higher on this list, even if I did finish it. I am going to finish it for a couple of different reasons. One, I want to finish it because somebody spent money on it for me, and I feel bad not getting my, honoring that by them spending the money. I want to finish the game because of that. But I also just kind of want to go back to it and play it differently. I want to just kind of mainline the story, which kind of sucks to say, but I want to see everything that game has to offer because I hear that there's some really amazing stuff in it. I just haven't got to it yet because part of it is I'm just kind of stuck grinding these stupid bananas. I think I'm about 3/4 of the way through the game, so I don't think I have like too terribly long left to get through it. And I did enjoy it at times, but there were also times where I was sitting there and I was just like, oh, well, I just spent 45 minutes punching a hole in the wall trying to get this banana. Was that really the best use of my time when I could have been getting further in this level and trying to, beat the boss and move on in the game? So it was that kind of thing. Number 6 is, I guess, our Switch 2 section of this list because it's going to be Mario Kart World. The reason why I put Mario Kart World over Donkey Kong is because if I sit down and say, okay, right now, which one would I rather play? It's probably Mario Kart World. It's not as good as 8, I think, just like off the bat. Now, over the course of time, maybe it will be looked upon as fondly as 8, but I think that's going to be tough because I think 8 is kind of, at this point, the definitive Mario Kart. And I'm not just saying that because it's been out on multiple systems and, multiple re-releases, and they did so much DLC with the new tracks and all that stuff. But I think just in terms of the look, the feel, the way it plays, I think it has kind of become the definitive Mario Kart experience. And I think World just isn't that, which is fine. I think it's just tough to follow up arguably the greatest release that this franchise has had with something that's a little bit different with this open world concept, but it's not even really an open world concept. I mean, yes, you can go out and explore things open world, but ultimately when you're playing through like the CC modes and all that stuff and doing the 4 tracks, it's really not all that different than any other version of the game, except for, I guess, technically you have a rolling start, but it's not even really a rolling start. You can still do the, get the little speed boost with the traffic light ticking down and all that stuff. So, I mean, like, it is open world, but they didn't go like all in. They kind of like dip their toe in the water instead of actually like diving in and taking like a real risk. But it is still Mario Kart. Mario Kart, just on the basis of being Mario Kart, is a great game. So just because of that, it gets, it's just a very solid title. I just wish it went further. I wish it kind of did more. So yeah, but still a very strong title in the franchise. And I think, if you have a Switch, I mean, obviously they have the bundle where you can get it. They have the other bundle now too, where I think you can get Pokemon. And I guess I've seen that maybe the bundle with Mario Kart is being phased out or something. I think I saw that somewhere, but I think that if you buy a Switch 2, you should probably buy Mario Kart World because it is worth having in your library for that system, especially if you have other people to play with. It's still a great party game, the whole thing. All right, number 5 is Ball Pit, which I think was probably the closest thing to like a Balatro that I got into, where it's like, technically like a run-based thing. Even though Hades 2 is like a run-based thing and Absolem is a run-based thing, but Ball Pit was kind of that like ticking that same box in your brain as Balatro did. The only thing that I have against it, and I think this game would have been higher on the list if it wasn't in there, is the whole village building aspect. I don't think it really fits in the game. I don't think it really serves a purpose. I think it would be a better game without it. And honestly, at some point in time, I really hope they patch the game to remove it, or not just remove, I mean, give you the option to not have to interact with it, because it's such a drag. You just want to get back into the actual playing of the game, not managing little forest tiles and village tiles and huts and things like that. Like, it's just like such a downer, like in between, like imagine like if you were playing Balatro and in between a run, like you then had to go some type of like resource management thing instead of just dealing the cards again and getting right back into it. I just want to get right back into the pit and, play the game. So that kind of dragged it down a little bit. That being said, it is worth putting up with the resource management thing, because the actual game itself is so good. It's such an enjoyable title that it is worth putting up with the things that aren't so great about it. But I just think it kind of separates it from being like a really, truly great and special game from being just, the good game that it is in its current state, which I have to imagine they're not going to do that and patch in the ability to turn that stuff off. I can't imagine that's actually going to happen. But it would be nice for me if they did. All right, number 4 on our list was kind of the big early game of the year last year, the first game that I finished last year, and that was Obsidian's Avowed. Avowed was a game that I was excited about because how Outer Worlds was kind of like taking that Fallout style and streamlining it and making it more accessible for me personally. I felt like Avowed was going to kind of do the same thing with, the sort of the Skyrim and Oblivion style thing, because it's in that fantasy style setting. And to a degree it does. I think Avowed story is a little lacking. I think it kind of starts to lose steam towards the end. I did really enjoy my time with it. I think some of the companions aren't as strong as others, and I ultimately just kind of found myself just sticking with the same people throughout the rest of the game because I just didn't really connect with the other characters. I think the combat is really fun. It's really solid. The dual wielding stuff is cool. Being able to have the pistols in there and kind of have some customization with that. I think the spell book thing where you can kind of like shoot the magic out was a really interesting way. Being able to swap between different weapon sets was really nice. So you can kind of have a lot of variety to your character. I really enjoyed a lot of the things they did with it, but because it is a fantasy style game, and fantasy is one of my least favorite styles of tropes and styles of just storytelling or media in general, like I don't really get into fantasy movies or books or anything like that. It's always going to kind of take it down a peg, for me. But Obsidian is just such a talented studio that I can get past a lot of that stuff and experience the game for what it is. Like, yes, it's a great playing game. It just happens to be wrapped in this sort of style that I'm just not as interested in, but I'm not going to let it stop me from playing it because it is a really, really strong title. And Obsidian, I mean, between that and Outer Worlds 2, they've got to be, developer of the year last year. They put out 2 amazing games last year, which, Outer Worlds 2, I think for me, I'm trying to remember the timeline, but I think it got kind of announced maybe at either the same time as Avowed or maybe a little bit before. And I genuinely thought the Outer Worlds 2 was going to come out first. And when they said Avowed was coming out, I was like, oh, okay. Well, maybe we'll get Outer Worlds 2 in 2026 then. And then when they said, oh no, we're going to put both out in the same year, I genuinely thought, okay, well, Outer Worlds 2 is going to get delayed. I didn't expect it to come out. And, obviously when it did, I was like, man, Obsidian's on a roll. They're a 2 studio game. I don't know if they're going to continue doing that or they're going to go back to just kind of having everybody work on one game. I am really curious to see what they're going to do though, because these kind of feel like half games to a degree. And I think it's good that they do this. These aren't like overly long padded games, but I am really curious if they ever are going to plan on doing like, instead of a 20-hour game, a 40-hour game, because I think you can still do a tight 40-hour game. It's just, I don't ever want to see them like really start padding it out and being like, yeah, this game is hundreds and hundreds of hours because we've got just garbage repeatable quests or, padding things out and fetch quests and things like that. Like, I don't think we need any of that stuff. So for what it is, I think it was a really strong effort from them. All right, number 3, this is where we kind of get into it. Number 3 and number 2 were kind of a little hard to figure out just because I think both are really, really strong titles. But I ended up going with Hades 2 for 3, simply because I just haven't played as much of it as the game I gave, the number 2 slot. I really, really enjoy Hades 2. The grind at the beginning was tough. I was having a really hard time getting through that like initial gated boss battle against Hecate, where you need to beat her in order to kind of progress the story. But I mean, I get what they're doing. They're really trying to teach you how to play the game, and you're getting more leveled up, and you're understanding new things in the game, new mechanics, and you're meeting different characters that give you different buffs and abilities and that stuff. So I understand that, but it did get to the point where I was like, man, I kind of just want to get on with that. But at the same time, when I did finally beat her, I was like, oh, it was such a sense of satisfaction to finally get through it. And that's when the game really started to click, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm fully on board, because I did like Hades 1. I thought it was a really solid game. I actually ended up playing it on my Switch at the time. And I really, really did enjoy it, but I certainly didn't like it as much as I like Hades 2. I think Hades 2 is a game that in 2026 I'm going to be spending a lot of time with because I didn't get to Hades 2 until about November. So I only had about 2 months with it as I was putting together this list, but it made such a strong impression that I was confident that it not only was going to make the top 10, it was probably going to be high up on the top 10. And then as I progressed further and further into the game and played more and more of it, I was like, okay, this isn't just, a top 10 game. This is a top 5 game and now a top 3 game because I just really, really enjoyed my time with it. I like the look of it. I like the feel of it. The way it plays is super nice. Being able to dash in and out and having the different abilities and just the combat's really solid because the combat in a game like this is really what makes or breaks it because that's what you're doing so much of. Yes, there is a story, but it's not necessarily like a big narrative game. It's a game where the combat is really, that's the main course of the game. So if that's lacking, that's really going to be a problem because if your combat's bad, it will drag everything else down. And if your combat's really good, it can elevate the game. Look at last year's game of the year for me, Dragon Age Veilguard, a game that has a lot of flaws with storytelling and character development and all these different things. But because the combat was so good and I just wanted to keep going back to actually the physical act of playing the game, it elevated the game so high to the point where it became my favorite game of the year. And Hades is very similar to that, where the combat is so good, it elevates the whole package, even though the rest of the package is very, very solid to begin with. So really enjoyable game, and I'm looking forward to playing more of it. Number 2, The Outer Worlds 2. As we talked about previously, Outer Worlds, my favorite game of 2019. Definitely looking forward to this sequel. It was my most anticipated game of the year outside of Grand Theft Auto because at the time, we thought that Grand Theft Auto 6 was going to come out this past year. Obviously it didn't. So Outer Worlds 2 kind of took that slot. Again, like I just said a few moments ago, didn't anticipate it to come out last year because Avowed came out, but it did. And I just absolutely loved it. It came out at the perfect time as I think I want to say I might have ended up with the day off. Because it came out on a Thursday, and I think I might have had that Friday off or something. And I remember I sat for the first weekend that game came out, and I really was putting in a lot of time into it, and I just really enjoyed the world. I like the combat quite a bit, some variety with the weapons. I do have some problems with the game. I think you run out of ammo way too fast. There are certainly times where I got stuck in kind of like a death loop because I was just out of ammo and I had to figure out other ways to kind of get around this. So that was my big kind of knock against it, is I just felt like there's a little bit of too much item scarcity at times. But I like the companions in the game. I don't think they're as strong as the companions from the first game, but they are good. They're fun to have around. Some of their side missions or their specific kind of companion missions are pretty solid. And I think top to bottom, it's probably overall a better presentation than the first game because the first game is a little half baked to a degree. It doesn't feel like it's completely fleshed out with everything. I guess maybe the better way to put it is maybe a little bit of unrealized potential in the first game, but I think we got to tap in to a little bit more of that with this. I think there's still lessons to be learned, and if we get an Outer Worlds 3, I think that from the lessons they've probably learned with Avowed in both Outer Worlds games and how much of a role they have been on with how good their games have been, I think that either the next game they do or maybe the Outer Worlds 3, if we get there, I think could end up being a game that's a more mainstream hit. I think Outer Worlds 2 and Avowed and Outer Worlds are games that fans of that style of game really like. But I mean, look at the mainstream game awards, Outer Worlds 2 wasn't even mentioned, which is, fine. It's, totally understandable. But I think they could get to the point where they start becoming less of the underground darling and more of the critical and mainstream darling. I think their games are always going to be imperfect, which is fine. But I think if they keep going the way they're going, I think eventually they're going to have a huge mainstream major hit on their hands because the team is just too talented to not. All right. It is now time for the official 2025 Perfect Reload Game of the Year. As I said this before, earlier in this video, I kind of alluded to it. There's only one game this year. As much as I did dive into Outer Worlds 2 when it first came out, there was only one game this year that I could not put down. And that's all I wanted to do. I didn't want to watch TV. I didn't want to watch a movie. I didn't want to listen to an album. I wanted to play this game to completion. I could not wait to play more of it. I wish there was more of it. And if there is a sequel, I will be first in line to play it. And that is Dispatch. Dispatch brings back a style of game I really love, that Telltale Walking Dead style. There's certainly been games that take influence from it that I've really enjoyed, like the Life is Strange series, some of the other stuff that like Deck Nine and Don't Not have done, Tell Me Why, things like that. But Dispatch, I think, just nails it to a T. Great character work all the way around. Voice cast is fantastic. Art style is really solid. Music is really good. It's a funny game. At times it's a serious and emotional game. Everybody just kind of clicks together and makes it such a special package. It's an unbelievably good one of those, right? Like, people will say like, oh, it's one of those games. It's one of those Telltale games. It's one of the best examples. I mean, outside of kind of that initial Walking Dead run, because that was just so important to games, because it was something kind of fresh and new at the time. Dispatch isn't really fresh and new because we've seen things like this before, but it kind of reminds everybody like, hey, that style of game, even though it's kind of maybe fallen out of favor a little bit, it's still a super effective way to tell a story through video games. And I think it was kind of a big wake up and a big reminder. A lot of the people that I follow on like social media that talk about games were really hyping this one up and talking about it. I waited a couple of weeks to get into it just so some of the episodes were out. And I could just I got the feeling I was going to be super into it. So I didn't really have to want to do a lot of that waiting. So I just kind of let the anticipation build until finally it really, I decided to pick it up and play through it. Like I said, I think I only had to wait, once I got through the first 6 episodes, I think I only had to wait a few days to finish it off. And of course, the day it came out, I finished it immediately. Really, really loved it. I think it's a good story. I think they set up something interesting for the sequel. In my game, Invisigal, is now a villain. I ended up doing the romantic stuff with Blonde Blazer instead. And it's a game that I want to go back and play more of, because I would like to make some other choices. There are some gameplay relevant choices that you can make where you can choose to not have, I decided to keep sonar. I decided to have, God, why can't I think of his name? The water boy, the guy that Joel Haver plays, but I ended up picking him instead of Phenomenon Man. And so I would like to make some of those, like flip flop some of those choices and just kind of see what they're like. Just such a fun game, such a great game. The dispatching portion of it, obviously it's not the greatest thing in the world. But ultimately it doesn't really have any effect on the story. The story is really done more through the cutscenes and the choices and all that stuff. I also like that they did give you the opportunity, if you didn't want to mess with it, you could turn the QuickTime events off and just watch it more like a choose your own adventure sort of cartoon kind of thing, which, I thought was kind of a cool option. I always like when people give you the option, they don't force you into playing their game a particular way, just like, South of Midnight, had the ability to turn off the combat. Dispatch, definitely number one with a bullet. There really wasn't any other game that was in contention once it came out. I was pretty confident that, because there were still games that I didn't play until after I finished Dispatch that could have been on this list, and some of them made this list. I didn't really get into Ball Pit until after Dispatch came out, and that's a game that it could have been, much higher than it was. Same with Hades 2. Just Dispatch is such a great game. Really, really enjoyed it. Really, really loved it. I love that style of game. I will always kind of gravitate towards very narrative heavy games, and certainly rewarded with this one. So that's a wrap on this year's worth of awards and top 10 lists and all that stuff. Thanks for checking this out. I know we only talk once a year, but like I said, I got some ideas for some videos over the next few weeks. And I think maybe we'll be a little bit more active this year. I can't promise that, it could even be after I get these videos out the rest of the month. Maybe I don't make another video this year, but I would like to do more with this channel. I would like to play games a little bit more. Maybe I'll record some gameplay if I have time. Maybe I'll record some gameplay of a game that I'm really enjoying and we'll talk about it, or, who knows what, but we'll probably do a little bit more on the channel this year. So thanks for your continued support. If you ended up watching this video, always very much appreciated. That's going to do it for me. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite games, movies, television shows, and albums were in 2025. And here's hoping 2026 is a phenomenal year for all media. We get some great games potentially coming the way unless delays hit us. The video game industry is obviously, there's two sides to it. Some of the greatest games of all time being made right now, but there's also massive layoffs, studio closures, mergers and acquisitions, and just some awful business practices. So it's it's a dicey time for the industry, but at the same time, we are getting treated to some of the best stuff we've ever played before. So yeah, very excited to see what comes down the pipeline with video games this year, especially the Switch 2 entering year 2. I want to see what they have to offer, and we'll go from there. But thanks again, everybody, and we'll talk soon.